Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns. The Anti-Federalists got it absolutely correct. You know, we've just been kind of having fun with this, and I'm delighted to be here with you. Yeah, this is Tom Navolis, your host. I know there's a lot of times I forget to introduce myself, but that's who I am. And we're here with the National Center for the Development of Constitutional Strategies, as well as I always tell you, what we launched here over the last few months, and CPAC is the Samuel Adams Center for Political Science. We're going to talk about that a little bit here from Melancton Smith and his comments as to what we should know as a people to keep ourselves correct. SACPS.org sure needs your help. You know what? We're looking to expand this nationally. Need some money. Yep, we got to have that to help these young people. So this is for high school through grad school. Go on to SACPS.org on the About tab and check out the little introductory video there. It tells you about it, why, so on and so forth. I think it's important that you work with some young folks, and that's what we're committed to doing. And you know what, you Gen Zers and even into the millennials, you know what, let's have a conversation. I'd surely like to have a conversation. And Shirley was a good friend of my wife's. What the heck. But anyway, if we could talk about what is people are policy, and that means you being, are you a people? If you're a people, then you make policy all the time, every day, whether you realize it or not. And what does that mean for school, work, family, and even governance? So anyway, back on to Melancton Smith and what he's all about. And yeah, you can find the audio archives of the program at where? Yeah, that's it, SamuelAdamsReturns.net. So that's where the archives are of the program. We'll try and work in off of YouTube, figure out how to put those links there on the website as well. Let's do. Anyway, I got the book out. I have stuff up on the screen. But it was real interesting. One of the things that they were arguing about, and this was on the 25th of June, 1788, and they were talking about the Senate and the senators, and Smith was arguing that this was going to be an oligarchy, no different than Brutus did, no different than the federal farmer did, that the Senate would become an oligarchy. And that was before the 17th Amendment. Go figure that. And as we talk about, and you can do research and so on. Anyway, the 17th Amendment really destroyed federalism, okay? Really has destroyed federalism, because the senators, who in the world do they represent? They don't represent anybody but themselves. We're seeing that in this whole healthcare debacle and everything else. And that's what got us into a lot of the treaty issues that I talked about a couple of weeks ago on Article 6, and why we have a corrupted form of federal government, because the Senate doesn't really, they're not accountable to anybody as they were expected to be under the Constitution, right? They were supposed to be responsible to the state legislators, which were the elected representatives of you. So that way, anyhow. So he talks about this whole idea in that, and he's going through this process, and he's talking about these offices and the ambitions of gaining the qualifications necessary to govern will be in some proportion to the chance of success. Sounds like the elections today. Well, how's that proportional? Anyway, if the office is to be perpetually confined to a few, John McCain, Lindsey Graham, so on and so forth, other men of equal talents and virtue, but not possessed of so extensive an influence, may be discouraged from aspiring to it. It's kind of tough finding the right people, right? The Kid Rock thing really rocks. I'm pretty excited about Kid Rock, announcing for the Senate, and Sheriff Clark. Come on, those are real people that get it. All right, now, the more perfectly we are versed in the political science, the more firmly will the happy principles of republicanism be supported. Whoa, that's a challenge right there. We don't teach that in schools anymore. Well, that's why we have sacps.org, is because we're augmenting what's not taught in schools, not even taught in homeschool, okay? You got to get that too, because I've talked to a number of homeschoolers. Pretty cool that, they're interested in what SACPS, they're going, yeah, we learned a bunch of stuff, but you know what? We don't know how to implement it. Well, anyway, he goes on to talking about, they were placing an amendment into place. They were talking about all of this stuff with government. He talks about his apprehension is that the power of recall would not be exercised as often as it ought to be. Remember, the Senate was to be recalled. A senator could be recalled by the state legislature if they were not doing what the state legislature sent them to do. How do you recall a senator today? They tried that in Arizona. They tried to take and even get someone else other than John McCain elected. Guess what? It just flat didn't work, doesn't work. So once again, you have these senators who are accountable to no one other than their oligarchy, so on and so forth. All right, let's get into some of the interesting things that I was talking about. Anyway, he got into this whole aspect of, hey, where's the money come from? How does that work? Who's arguing this whole piece? He talks about the influence. This really rocked for me. I'll tell you what, he gets into this argument talking about gentlemen have ridiculed his apprehension. Remember, media, you know what? Yeah, okay, mainstream media is doing their ridiculing, but you know what? When we ridicule them for being stupid, for not knowing constitutional intent and truth, suck it up, you pansies. It's about time you take and you learn something, and your minds are as clear as the dark of night. Anyhow, this goes on to say, he says, how do you say that? Are people to be corrupted by their own money? Wait a minute. De Tocqueville talks about that in 1850-ish when he writes, but here it is. You have this guy saying people are corrupted by what? By their own money. He goes on to say, sir, in many countries, the people pay money to corrupt themselves. Why should it not happen in this country? Certainly, the Congress will be as liable to corruption as other bodies of men. Have they not the same frailties and the same temptations? With respect to the corruption arising from the disposal of offices, the gentlemen have treated the argument with insignificance. Boy, isn't that what Congress does today, too? Hey, big deal about who gets into office, who's the bureaucrat, who gets appointed, except when it comes to the Trump administration, because they're trying to do the right thing. So they don't want those folks in there because they're going to attack everything that he's talking about here. But let anyone make a calculation and see whether there will not be good offices enough to dispose of to every man who goes there, who will then freely resign his seat. For can anyone suppose that the member of Congress would not go out and relinquish his $4 a day? That's all they got at that time, was $4 a day, get that. So he's saying they're going to relinquish their $4 a day for $2,000 or £3,000 a year. Now, let's see. How is it that a congressperson becomes a millionaire when they never had a real job? Melancton Smith is talking about that. You get that? And that was the other thing. It was interesting is that when I was reading about that today, was that David Clark refused to go into the Trump administration because a lot of the pundits were saying, well, all he wants to do that as a stepping stone to the Senate, because it happened in a lot of other administrations. A lot of these people get into some, bureaucratic job for a period of time, and next thing you know, they're running for Senate. That's how Warren you know, what is she? I can't tell if she's an American Indian or what. But anyway, that's how Senator Warren got in, is that she actually was appointed by Obama into some bureaucratic position, and then she ran for Senate. Well, you know, that's happened with the Clinton administration. Look, it's happened with the Bush administration. It's happened before. So I think that according to an anti-federalist position, you know what? Sheriff Clark has used some of the greatest wisdom in understanding political systems and methodology that, you know what, I haven't read about since reading the Anti-Federalist, you know. So this is, you know, what you get. And because congressmen would be willing to go into bureaucratic offices and set up the positions. Okay, so going down that rabbit hole, they said, let's see, he goes, it is here objected that no man can hold an office created during his time in Congress. Okay, but it will be easy for a man of influence who has his eye a favorite office previously created and already filled to say to his friend who holds that office, here, I will procure you another place of more emulant, which means more importance, right? Provided you will relinquish yours in favor of me. The Constitution appears to be a restraint when in fact it is none of that at all. I will presume, sir, there is not a government in the world in which there is greater scope for influence and corruption in the disposal of offices. Sir, I will not declaim and say all men are dishonest, but I think that in forming a constitution, if we presume this, we shall be on the safest side. The, let's see, extreme is certainly less dangerous than the other. And he goes on to finish off with this whole idea that, you know, don't know where it's going to go, especially with the intentions of the bureaucracies. So, you know, what we saw over the many, many years of the Constitution was what? Congress starts developing all these different departments that were not originally intended in the Constitution. Now, why is that, do you think? Oh, let's start thinking through what Melancton Smith just said about how do you take and you add the extra personal ducats in your bucket. You know, how does that happen? Well, it happens, you know, from exactly what he said. There's corruption that is going on out there. And to the effect of what? An expanding government, expanding bureaucracy. You know, it's quite interesting to me and relatively, anyway, I go back through. That's why I always say the Anti-Federalists got it right. They saw this coming under the idea of the Constitution and exercising that. You know, he goes on to say he's frequently observed a restraint upon the state government, which Congress never can be under. You get that? You know, so here we can restrain the states, and that was even under the Articles of Confederation. There were restraints. So guess what? Under the Constitution and its framework. So it is a truth capable of demonstration that the nearer the representative is to the constituent, the more attached and dependent he will be. That's a whole nother thing. You know, I've talked about this before, is that these guys live in Congress and in Washington, D.C. way too long. So, you know, as we take a look at how bureaucratic creep came along, Melancton Smith taking and speaking of that, what is it that people are policy? Ladies and gentlemen, get involved. You know, learn what it is from policy making, learn what it is about when it comes to republicanism, not the Republican Party, but republicanism, and help the young people to understand that with Samuel Adams, Center for Political Science, sacps.org. So we're going to come back next week. And, you know, we've run out of time. It always happens that way. And, you know, thanks for going down the rabbit holes with me in the mirrors of history here at Samuel Adams. Yes, he does. He returns. And those anti-federalists, they absolutely got it right here on Liberty Works Radio Network.